David Oistrakh. If you've ever gotten properly into the world of classical music, chances are you've heard of this absolute icon. But here's the thing, what makes a legend and what makes Oistrakh Oistrakh? I'm violinist Sumina Studer and I'm your new host for Tonebase Violin here on YouTube. I'm so stoked to be diving deep into the classical music world, all things violin, and to properly nerd out about violin history with you. So as mentioned, today we're going to be diving deep into the life and legacy of one of the most legendary violin figures of the violin world, which is David Oistrakh. Let's find out more. When we think of a truly great violin soloist or performer, there are different aspects for us to consider. Musicality, virtuosity, tone of sound, stage presence, and a true understanding and respect for musicianship, as well as an unrivaled understanding and interest for the instrument. It is a commonly known fact, and I think you would agree with me when I say that it is extremely rare to find all of these qualities in one musician. But industry experts would agree that David Oistrakh embodied exactly that. The legendary violinist that outlived his own time. So, Oistrakh was renowned for his unparalleled virtuosity, his profound musicality, and in my opinion, his most interesting trait was his ability to completely immerse the audience with his tone of sound. We are talking about a violinist that is as legendary as, let's say, Michael Jackson in the pop world. He's that important. David Oistrakh was praised by the violin father himself, Yehudi Menuhin, as one of the 2 or 3 greatest living fiddlers of our age. Let that sink in. Oistrakh himself lived during a very, very tumultuous time in history, with political tensions in particular running extremely high. Being a prominent figure in the Soviet Union, he faced criticism from some corners for his political opinions. He himself was Jewish, yet received a lot of backlash from the Jewish community for being a sympathizer and supporter of the Soviet Communist Party. In fact, he was so intertwined with the Soviet Communist Party that he received the highest honor, the highest award, which is the Stalin Prize. That same year, he even joined the Communist Party. I think it's quite incredible because despite this political scrutiny, his dedication to his craft and his undeniable talent transcended him to international stages. At the time, that was pretty much impossible. So he had big plans to go and play in America. At the time, that was only really possible as an official visitor from the state. We're talking about a time and place here that was absolutely unheard of. In fact, he would have been the first Soviet musician to have performed in America since the Cold War. That is major, no pun intended. However, I hate to break it to you, but these plans did not come to fruition because he became very ill at the time, and somebody else was sent as an official visitor to the United States. Oistrakh's concert was postponed, and he played shortly after. As a violinist, we have to address one major thing: Oistrakh's playing technique. He really popularized the Russian violin school. It is a legacy that Oistrakh significantly helped in shaping. The bow hold, the vibrato, the posture, the sound production. He truly was a proud ambassador of the Russian violin school. And not only that, he was also a proud ambassador of Russian violin music, or just in general, Russian classical music. Through his technique and his playing style, he really infused the compositions and his performances with the rich traditions and soulful melodies that really define Russian classical music literature. Thus, as you might have guessed, he was close friends or at least acquaintances with many composers that define Russian music literature, such as Dmitri Shostakovich. Oistrakh was the one to premiere the Shostakovich Violin Concerto No. 1 in 1955 after having helped Shostakovich compose it and, make it playable for the violin. Oftentimes, in case you're not aware, composers work with the instrumentalists to make sure it's actually playable on their instrument and to really maximize the virtuosity that this instrument is able to convey. They oftentimes have a violinist, for example, for a violin concerto that will help them write it or help them give the last polish for the composition. So in this case, David Oistrakh helped Shostakovich finish the Shostakovich Violin Concerto No. 1 and helped him premiere it as well. As the musical trailblazer that Oistrakh was, It was no secret that there were many pieces that were dedicated to him in particular. Some of these composers that dedicated pieces of works for him happened to be legendary Russian composers Aram Khachaturian or Sergei Prokofiev. The latter he actually met when Oistrakh was only 12 years old, when he played Beethoven's super difficult and super beautiful violin concerto in a public performance. And can we just have a moment of silence for a 12-year-old playing Beethoven's violin concerto, because I know a lot of master's students that still haven't played it. Like, it's such a difficult concerto. It's one of the most musically and technically challenging pieces for violin. So for a 12-year-old to play it, it's quite extraordinary. But back to Oistrakh. To understand how Oistrakh was such a symbol for Russian music, we should know a thing or two about his upbringing. Oistrakh grew up in a household with music. His father was a bookkeeper, but also an amateur violinist, and his mom was a choral singer. Little David Oistrakh began violin playing at the age of 5, and by his teenage years it was pretty clear that he will go down the path of becoming a professional violinist. So much so that he started studying with Pavel Stolyarski, a pedagogical violin legend, at the Odessa Conservatory in Ukraine. So if you look at the family tree, or the violin teacher tree, if you will, Stolyarski himself studied with Leopold Auer, who was a Hungarian violin pedagogue legend himself. So the family tree, aka the violin teacher tree, went really far back to one of the most legendary violin pedagogues ever. Oistrakh was by no means a rich person growing up, so helping his low-income family get by in his teenage years, he actually was a wandering fiddler. I'm thinking this is one of the reasons and influences why his famously humble personality has manifested in him. And he has said about his traveling times, quote, "I played with good conductors and bad, but it was all a great school for me." Being the legend that Oistrakh is, let's talk about his instruments, because he has played on some incredible violins throughout his lifetime. Amongst those incredible instruments that Oistrakh was able to play was a violin made in 1727, the Guillet Guarneri del Gesù. Guarneri del Gesùs are some of the most insanely beautiful sounding instruments, right up there with Stradivarius, dare I say. And we will talk about Oistrakh Stradivariuses, plural, in just a moment, believe me, because that is really quite a remarkable thing. But let me talk you through some of the other instruments that he has had the honor to play. He has also played on an incredible instrument by Pietro Giacomo Rogeri, one of my top 5 violin makers, I would say, that I love. This instrument was made somewhere between 1715 and 1720. That's what it was marked as. He's also had the honor to play on a 1629 Amati violin. 1629, let that just sink in. Amati was known to be the grandfather or the godfather of violin making schools. The violins that we know the way that they are right now, Amati was sort of like the godfather of them all. Stradivarius studied with him, and Amati had many other famous students. However, all of these are nice and beautiful, but we all know the name of Stradivarius, Antonio Stradivarius, the violin god himself. Now, these instruments are extremely valuable and rare. So many of them went either lost or damaged, so there are not many instruments around at all anymore. To even come across one instrument is an extremely rare thing. Now, Oistrakh played on not only one, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5. He played on 10 Stradivarius violins on rotation. Most of them were owned by the Russian state back then. Now, as I mentioned, Stradivarius was a student of Amati. In the beginning stages of Stradivarius's violin making, he was making instruments that resembled a lot Amati, his teacher's instruments, and then he created instruments that became more his own. So they became more powerful, actually. They became more unique to him, almost like a fingerprint. So Stradivarius really defined what a modern instrument is today. I'm saying this because one of the instruments that Oistrakh was able to play was an early instrument, a 1671 instrument by Stradivarius, which was made in the Amati period, so when the instruments resembled a lot Stradivarius' teacher Amatis. That instrument was given to him by the Queen Elizabeth of Belgium herself. He also had the honor to play on an incredible 1702 Conte de Fontana Stradivarius violin. Now this instrument is from Stradivarius' golden period, which is considered his best work, and he's also played on his 1705 Marsic violin, which is a prime example of Stradivarius' work as well. That violin in particular was actually passed on to his son, who was also a violinist. So the reason I'm nerding out about these violins is, first of all, I'm a violinist, but also I happen to work at an instrument shop here in London. It's a string instrument shop specialized in old Italian violins. I'm surrounded by instruments and violins in particular all day, every day. I also am always surrounded by incredible instrumentalists and students and music lovers. So I can really tell you from first-hand experience, for someone to come across a Stradivarius violin is not that easy, and to play on one, definitely not easy. To get your hands on one of these, to play on 10 of them, absolutely crazy and a dream for every violinist. I've seen a couple of Stradivariuses in my life. I don't think I've seen 10 different ones in my life just yet, but the instruments that Oistrakh played on, these are some of the top examples of Stradivariuses, Roggeris, Guarneris. These are incredible, incredible instruments. All of these instruments that Oistrakh played on are incredible and impressive, but I think one of the most enduring legacies that Oistrakh has left us with really is the inspiration that he has left for future generations to follow his footsteps in some shape or form. He really has shaped a whole generation of violinists. It is hard to imagine what violin playing and performance of this instrument would be without having had Oistrakh lead the path. His technical brilliance combined with his expressive playing style really set a new standard for aspiring violinists, in my opinion. And with that, showing us what is really possible with dedication, passion, and a lot of practice. The extraordinary life and legacy of David Oistrakh, a true icon of the violin world. His sound and influence really still reverberate through concert halls and impact students around the globe, inspiring countless musicians to reach for that golden warm sound. Now, as we're coming to the end of this video, I would love to know how you first heard about Oistrakh's playing, what you know about his life, and if you've learned something new about him today. Drop it in the comments. I would love to start a discussion there and learn something from you as well. Until then, I shall see you in the next video. I'm very excited. Stay tuned and see you next time. Bye.